Hello, everybody. This is here we are again with RPG R&D, but it's a special episode because when Jess and hi Jess, co-host
Hello,
Jess,
Craig.
when Jess and I got talking about doing this podcast about RPG R&D and talking about GMing and design and all this stuff, we came to realize that we are both gigantic horror fans in general, horror movies in particular. So we thought, well, we'll just like every so often do an episode that's like an extra thing where we'll talk about horror movies or TV shows or books or whatever. So here we are. This is like the RPG R&D Horror Show. And I debated for a long time of making that all one word, which is which would be an Anthony Burgess reference for my teacher co-host. If you know Clockwork Orange, horror show is one of the slang terms that Alex and his droogs use, and it means good. If something is real horror show, it's real good. But I didn't want people to get confused and think that this was a Kubrick.
Right. Well, what do you mean?
Well, that's to say there's Kubrick did two I guess two horror movies, would you say? The Shining and I would call wait a minute, am I thinking Kubrick? Did Kubrick do Clockwork Orange? Who am I?
Did he? Let's see. I'll look it up real quick.
I can't believe, because he did so few. He did, because it always took him like 5 years to make a movie, and now my head is telling me he did that. Clockwork Orange is his
Filmography.
What a great way to start off with your
Oh
vast
yeah,
your
it's
vast
okay.
knowledge of horror movies,
he
Craig.
did Doctor Strangelove, Lolita. These are collaborations. Space Odyssey. He did Clockwork Orange.
Okay,
Yeah,
I
he
was
did.
thinking, like my brain was farting and thinking maybe that was somebody else. Who was it? Who could have been doing that one? But Clockwork Orange is kind of a horror movie. It's a dystopian,
Yeah.
terrible society. Alex and his droogs are monsters. They are murdering, raping, violent thugs.
That's horrible. Yeah.
And it ends horribly with things not going well. Oh, by the way, everybody, there's going to be spoilers galore here, so we may talk about things in horror movies that have, if you haven't seen them, sorry. Just if we start talking about a horror movie and you're like, I haven't watched that one yet, maybe skip ahead.
It's okay. I think that it's okay to be spoiled a little bit on horror movies because like a lot of if it's a really well done horror movie, as long as it doesn't have like a big twist or anything, if it's really well done, it doesn't matter if you know the ending, because it's all about how the director increases the tension and builds it up, and it's all about like getting to those points of a real scare. I I've had a lot of horror movies spoiled for me and still really, really enjoyed watching them.
Oh, sure. I mean, with a horror movie, it's kind of like, you know how it's probably going to end. It's probably going to end with a lot of characters dying and things going really terribly. So it's just it's a question of just what's the journey? How do we get there? What are the surprises along the way?
Exactly. And horror movies reward you for knowing the tropes of the genre.
Oh, sure.
And I think that that's one of the really fun things about being a horror movie nerd in general. Like, you can understand so many fun things that they do. There are even whole TV shows and movies that are just about those horror tropes. Like Scream was all horror tropey. And what's the American Horror Story is all about horror movie tropes every season.
Oh, absolutely.
So,
yeah.
and they reward you for knowing these things because
Yep.
it makes it more interesting.
And they they can do it tongue-in-cheek like Scream did, where it's like, oh, hey, we've got a character who is very self-aware, Randy, who knows his way around horror movies, and he starts naming all the rules, and they make a joke out of it because those characters live in a world where horror movies exist, as opposed to people in zombie movies who never live in a world where zombie movies exist.
Right.
Unless it's Return of the Living Dead, and we can talk about that sometime. But or like with American Horror Story, it's usually not played for comedy. It's played for Easter egg kind of value. It's like the big horror fans will enjoy the little nod to like, oh, that was a moment that was like right out of kind of an homage to this particular movie or to this slasher or whatever.
Yeah, well, American Horror Story, one of the most recent seasons, I think it was 1980. I want to say 1984, but I might just be like brain melted from watching Wonder Woman last night.
It was 80 something, yeah, wasn't it?
Yeah, and that was it's just a camp slasher film, like a sleepaway camp slasher series, and it hits all of the touchstones, like the final girl and the villain that's not actually the real villain because the real villain's behind the scenes. Like they do all of that, and like knowing those things, it doesn't ruin the suspense at all, because in fact sometimes makes it more suspenseful because horror movies rely on dramatic irony, which is when the viewer knows something that the characters in the movie do not.
Right. It was 1984. Real quick looking that up.
Okay, good.
What makes that year so special to people that they keep using 1984? It's like, okay, second, we're well into the 80s. Ronald Reagan's been president for most of his term.
There was a George Orwell novel, so
the Orwell novel. So there's like that year is tied into that.
The Night Stalker apparently was like a big thing for the American Horror Story season that I was just talking about.
Yep. And that was at that time. Yeah, wow. Just in the last year or two, there's been like a couple of big name movies series that have been 1984, and of course there's the Orwell. Yeah, what is it? What's fascinating about that particular year? I guess I don't know. That we could delve into that sometime. But
yeah. That is a really good point. Like, why 84?
Why wasn't it 87? Like.
Yeah. Oh man, but yeah, back to Kubrick though, because you mentioned that he had done some horror movies. Like obviously, The Shining is a horror movie, and I would agree with you that A Clockwork Orange is also a horror movie. But I think 2001: A Space Odyssey is also a horror movie.
Parts of it, sure.
He's just very good at that. I just looked at his Wikipedia page too and learned that he turned down directing the Exorcist movies. So
really,
apparently, yeah.
Oh man,
those would have been some interesting movies.
I'm trying to imagine the kid in the bed with the two priests, and what those would be shot like. Like what would the visuals be? The Kubrickian visuals. We were joking before we started talking here about the 1 point perspective, and this like 1 point perspectives, static shots that linger. Just some of those Kubrick tropes, and we're talking very much about tropes here, and we can get even deeper and talk about like specific directors or specific franchises tropes as well. Like what are the tropes that you dig on the most? What are the ones that, like, whether they're good or bad?
Okay, so my favorite, I think, is when they do a scene cut that's also a jump scare at the same time. Like, someone like hit something with a hammer, and that's the new transition. You know what I'm saying? I don't know what to call those. But I love them.
It's a jump scare, jump cut kind of.
Yeah, they always get me, and it's just kind of like I'm awake now. Let's keep watching. I love when my suspense is built to a point that it's rewarded in terms of the suspense is broken because you get the scare, but also nothing meaningful happens. Like the cat jumps out of the locker, stuff like that. I love that in horror movies, and that is it's such a cliche.
It's got a lot of haters. There's a lot of people that will hate the trope of the cat jumping out of the, or it turns out it was just the wind, or like something that wasn't an actual threat. Well, but they serve their purpose, right? Mm-hmm. Like having those inconsequential, like this wasn't really going to kill you scare, like allows the characters to think they're safe.
Yeah, kind of an adjacent one to that is where like the tension is building, like you're getting ready to open the door and you open it and it's just grandma. I like that too, and I think the movie It Follows did a really good job with one certain scene where they open the door and it's just like the main character's sister or friend or something, and then the monster comes in from behind the hallway. That worked really well because I thought that they were just going to do it's just so-and-so trope. But then they gave you the scare, and I thought that because they reduced my tension immediately and then like right away built it back up. I love It Follows. Have you seen that?
I have.
Oh man.
I've watched it a couple times.
Yes.
That's
Those
got
static shots. Ooh.
yeah. Well, that movie's got like it relies heavily on one of my favorite tropes, which is like the slow plotting killer. Which has probably been was perhaps introduced with Michael Myers, with Halloween, with him just off in the distance, all those early shots where it's just like he's over there, like and then he's like later on Laurie's going on about doing stuff and he's over there and like she sees him for a moment and then she looks away and she looks back and he's gone. That's and that's a trope unto itself. But it's like this slow, like it's like he's always there and he's always getting a little closer, and then they take that to outrageous extremes with like any stalker slasher type that's just is walking after the victim that is running and falling,
Yeah.
and the killer just keeps coming. Whereas in It Follows, it's so purposeful. It's so specific, and like you said, a lot of static shots of or very, if not static, at least long, lingering shots.
Yeah,
of
really long.
of the thing that's the follower, or whatever it's called. We never really get a name for the thing. Just slowly making its way, and combine that with the idea that you don't know if the person that you're watching walk slowly toward you is the monster or not, because it can appear as just a person. So there are times when you see somebody just walking slowly in the background and you're like, is that the thing, or is that just like somebody that happens to be out for a slow leisurely stroll in the middle of all this horror these characters are going through?
That was one of the most horrifying films I've ever seen. There was just something about that movie in particular that really got me. It's not like I'm constantly worried that there's going to be a ghost chasing me. Like sometimes you watch a scary movie and you're afraid of the dark for a little bit. It wasn't like that, but it was like this dread, and I love that. Please.
I was waiting for you to say that word. That is the word. It is dread. And not all horror movies do that. A lot of horror movies, they traffic in the scare, the immediate scare, like just the punctuation marks of scares at different points. Some work like dread versus tension. Like there's some horror movies that it's tension and you're like really kind of your elbow, your arm, your shoulders are kind of pinched up and you're at the edge of your seat and you're kind of holding your breath a little bit. That's tension. And I was not often tense during It Follows, but I was always kind of like, like, and just knowing, like, dread, like, this thing is, like, it's right there. It's right there. It's slowly coming toward them, and these people have it turned around. And it wasn't quite the same kind of tension because it is so slow. Like, that thing's not going to suddenly run at them.
Yeah. And it gives you the same feeling that you can imagine the characters have at the same time. Where, as opposed to the Halloween movies, which is one of my favorite franchises, like the feelings that the characters have are much more like, we got to do this now. We gotta go. We gotta fight. Whereas in It Follows, you really just get the sense that they are constantly dreading. I don't know how to kind of explain that because it's very similar, but at the same time, very different.
Well, it takes until the end of the movie before they have a plan, which makes it different from a lot of slasher movies or stalker movies where there's usually like once the final girl or the bulk of the characters that become aware that there's something going on, they start formulating plans. They start trying to actively do things. They try to make specific escapes, or they try to take the fight to the monster. Whereas
call the cops.
Whereas with It Follows, it took until like the last 20 minutes before the characters did anything except just keep moving. They and talked about things a lot and built character, so you actually came to care for them. That's one of the things. That's one of the places where slasher movies can fall down, is that because the characters are constantly fighting for their lives, they're not actually like conversing, and we're not getting to know them terribly well. At least a lot of them. So you don't, you're just like, well, okay, it's just another stupid teenager that's going to get slaughtered. Whereas with It Follows, I cared about every single one of the characters that we meet because we got a chance to know each of them, even if they weren't all, quote unquote, the final girl.
Yeah. And like, it just did a a really good job. Just overall, I think about that movie all the time.
Oh man.
I do, because there's so much going on, like with the Detroit, the dilapidated buildings that you go past. And I live in Michigan, so I've seen Detroit in person, both the city itself and like the kind of the rundown buildings that are around. And there's just, I don't know, because it was set in Michigan, maybe that got me, because it has stuff about like this very Michigan specific economic downturn.
It felt more real to you because it's something
It
you were
did.
familiar with.
Yeah.
It's
And I
hard.
was,
It's hard to get on board with, to have it affect you that way personally when, like I've never personally experienced a repetitious effort by some slasher in my dreams trying to kill me and having my friends actually die in their sleep. And so I don't see Freddy as that kind of a threat. Whereas even though I recognize small town America, and Elm Street is small town America, but, like you saw like a town that, a neighborhood that looked like what you're familiar with.
mm-hmm.
So it makes
And
it more real.
the main character is a woman as well. And, I was in situations like hers before, because the whole thing starts off, she went on a date and she had sex with a guy, and that was just something that she was going to do. And then all these consequences. And I just really like thinking like, what exactly was the writer and what were the directors, getting at? Like, what was I think that the movie was actually trying to say something rather than, being a horror movie. I think all horror movies try to say something. They have a little bit of commentary. I don't think it's true that, I'm sure that there's an exception out there.
Sure. I think a lot of them do. I think a lot of them can couch social commentary, even if it's just kind of lightly, like a light dusting of social remarks. It Follows is like, you could label it a movie about a number of things. I think it's a movie about STDs. It's about catching something from sex and making that quote unquote societal mistake and paying for it. There's certainly, well, I don't know what's the word I'm looking for, but there's layers of it that have to do with women in control and taking control of their own bodies and sexuality and how she decides to handle the situation that she's in after being put into it by a guy. So there's a lot to that sort of thing. Does Friday the 13th say much sociologically or say much culturally? I don't know.
No, not as much. No.
There are moments where Jason Takes Manhattan takes some jabs at like 80s culture, and like what 80s culture was like, and that was in 1988, by the way, not 1984. But like that particular series isn't steeped too much in other social commentary.
Yeah, there have been a lot of like video essays out there, like on Friday the 13th in particular, about its commentary on parents listening and queer culture and stuff like that. But it's okay to just kind of have a mindless horror movie too. That's totally fine if that is your jam.
Yeah,
you do you.
Well, a lot of horror movies, if Friday the 13th is about, if slasher movies are about like parents not listening to kids, then a lot of horror movies are about parents not listening to kids.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's not to say that the filmmakers weren't trying to instill some of that in there. Some of them probably were. They were making very specific choices about how the adults relate to the younger characters. But I think most of the time it's just, we have to have the parents not believe them, otherwise the kids aren't in danger.
So we got onto this little tangent by talking about my favorite horror movie trope. What's your favorite horror movie trope?
My favorite trope overall? That's...
Or just one you like. Or hate.
there's I simultaneously love and hate the escalating of the monsters or the slasher in sequels. Like as the sequel always has to kind of outdo the last one, it has to become a little more wacky. The monster has to become a little more ridiculous and over the top and more lethal and more monster like. I like there's it's like there's a peak and then a valley, right? There's like, oh, it's great that Freddy's getting more and more crazy and wacky and he's funny. And then there comes a point where it's like, okay, it's way too much and it's kind of tailing off because it's like now it's just a joke machine.
And now he's in space.
Yeah. I really like Jason X. I think it's really funny. I think it does a great job of poking fun at the whole series.
Mm-hmm.
In particular, the holodeck like the holodeck portion. Have you seen the movie?
I have. I saw it back a while ago. It's been a long time since I've seen it.
There's literally Jason gets trapped inside of a holodeck, like a recreational holographic room, and he is put into he's put into one of his earlier movies, basically, and he meets he comes walking through, and there's two like slinky bikini wearing co-eds who are like, let's drink alcohol and have sex, and that's like really, really in your face and jokey, and then he proceeds to murder them both. And it's clearly they are absolutely making fun of themselves.
Yeah, that's one of the fun things about those long running franchises, because I mean, it happens in the Freddy Krueger series, Nightmare on Elm Street. I was trying to think of what is it happens in the Friday the 13th series. I don't think that it happens very much in the Halloween series.
No,
that
not really.
that series it kind of takes itself pretty seriously, but it also doesn't run into the trap of making Michael Myers, he doesn't escalate as much as these other more campy ones do.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that makes the latter installments of the original series of Halloween forgettable is that he doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
He's just Michael Myers every time. Mm-hmm. Whereas, whether you love it or hate it, Freddy is funny in those last few.
Yeah.
And they just keep making him stupider and funnier and slapstickier and more tongue in cheek. And Jason goes from being just like this kind of hulking killer to being super duper tough to actually coming back from the dead and becoming like a zombie, and he's supernatural. And by the time you get to the tail end of it, he's completely unkillable. And he's full on monster. There'd always be the reveal of when the mask comes off and it's all maggots and skull face and
he's getting grosser. Yeah.
Yeah, remember the second movie when it was just like a big dude with a bag on his head?
Was it? Oh yeah. Oh, I was like in Friday the 13th. No.
In Friday the 13th, he was just a big guy with a bag on his head in the second movie.
Oh no, I maybe I missed that one.
Well, the first movie we all know.
Mm-hmm.
Was not.
Well, it wasn't
Jason.
It wasn't Jason, yeah.
It was his mother. And then the second movie, it's him, and he's just living in the woods with him. He wears a burlap sack on his head with a hole cut in it.
I don't think I saw that.
And he's got that at the beginning of the third one, and then in the third one is when he gets the hockey mask.
Okay.
Which he steals from the class clown character who is there to he does the hockey mask thing and tries to scare his friends, and then Jason ends up getting the hockey mask from him when he gets murdered.
I have scared a friend with a hockey mask before. It was a lot of fun.
I imagine
it was for his birthday. His birthday is on December 30th. No, it's January 1st or December 31st. He's a New Year's baby. And it was in high school, and I don't know how we got a hockey mask. We had one, and we were supposed to go over to his house, and I just stood there in the window with the mask on. That was fun. Fun time.
I've never done the hockey mask thing. I threatened to do it at my friend's wedding reception because I have a pair of friends who got married on a Friday the 13th.
Oh, fun.
And I threatened when I was talking to him about the reception. I was like, "Would you mind if I I'm not gonna like run around and like accost anybody, but I'm just gonna put on a jumpsuit and a hockey mask, and I'm gonna have a plastic machete, and I'm just gonna walk through the reception. How do you feel about that?" And the guy was like, "Yeah, do that." and the wife, the bride to be, was like, "Ah."
No.
So it didn't happen, but yeah, there was brief consideration.
I've been camping and LARPing on Friday the 13th before, like next to, like in cabins by the water kind of stuff.
Man.
And those are my favorite times. I'm like, yes, let's get, this is the beginning of a horror movie. Let's do it.
I had a coworker once tell me the beginning of a horror movie, like this thing that he actually, I'm going to take a quick sidetrack. He had he was in college. I was out of school and I was working, and he was an intern. And he had just gone down to New Orleans for spring break with his friends. And he told the story. He said, like, we went down and we did the thing, and we did like a few days on Bourbon Street and everything, and got drunk a whole bunch. And then we started running out of things to do other than, like, during the day. You wanted to find something to do before the nightlife kind of kicked in. And so they find these flyers that are just that's just directions to some place that will there's like some guy that lives out on the bayou that'll take you out on a fan boat and tool you around, and you look at all the snakes and the alligators and everything else. And he was telling me the story about how, like, they just picked a random flyer and they got in their rental car and they just drove out there, and it was a map on the flyer. This is pre-GPS, pre-smartphones. And they just, like, we just followed the map. And I was like, and where did the map take you? And he said it, like, literally took us onto this dirt road that ended in a dead end at, like, a shack on a platform on the water. Nice. And I looked at him and I said, "You are lucky to be alive." That is the opening. That's the first act of a horror movie. Like, if things had gone poorly, like he took you out on the water and then didn't bring you back in, that's it. You're getting hunted in the bayou.
That is definitely, that is terrifying. That is so scary. There are so many things that we do, like, now that are the beginnings of horror movies. Like, we get into strangers' cars all the time for Uber. Well, we used to when that was a safe thing to do.
Yeah. There was just an Uber. It wasn't Uber, but it was like a made up. What was it called? I just watched it. The name's not sticking with me. The name of the movie was the name of the app, and it was about a rideshare driver guy that was taking people out. And he was killing people. Like, that was what the horror movie was about. Like, he was the killer was the driver.
In Kalamazoo, well, the driver didn't kill any of his passengers, but he did kill some other people. So that, I mean, I think that was partially based on a true story.
Is that Ride?
Was it like lit? What?
Was it Ride?
Rideshare?
RYDE, Ride. Was that what it was?
Ride. That makes sense. It's kind of like Lyft with a Y.
Yeah. From 2017.
There was
Is it really that old? I'm trying to think. I want to see the actor. Like. It might have been it. Like I said, it looks like there's actually been a few movies that have been done about this sort of thing. Which is not surprising, like when like streaming video became a thing, suddenly there was a glut of horror movies that were about killers killing people on the stream, and people were watching and doing likes and thinking it was all staged and all that sort of thing. So, like, anytime a new technology kind of starts to become a thing, or a new there's a cultural shift in something like that, yeah.
Yeah, there was that movie Unfriended that kind of was like that, where they were on a Skype call or something. And then there was a movie that came out this year in 2020, so last year, called The Host or something like that, which is about a Zoom call that was done during the pandemic, and it was filmed like over Zoom or something like that. Wow. So I want to see that. That's on my. There are a couple movies from this year that are on my list to see.
Things that are done that were done during the pandemic that are all like Zoom kind of stuff. Like, I've seen some really interesting, like, the found footage movies,
I love those.
where there's some of them get it's like, oh, seriously, because the found footage movie falls down when you wonder why the hell doesn't the person just drop the camera and run. But every so often you get one that there becomes a reasonable reason for why that person's not doing that, or like they don't realize that it's going to go horrific immediately. And you don't maybe even really truly know until the very tail end. So it's just somebody that's talking, that's got a camera, or they're talking on like a Skype call type thing, or Zoom or whatever, like some sort of teleconferencing thing, that do some really interesting things. But you got to look around because there's a lot of trash. There's a lot of really just, it's like, well, it's a cheap way to do a horror movie, and it's an easy way to like do it. What the heck is that?
It's probably a car going by. Yeah, I heard it too. It was probably just a car. I was worried that it was from my end, but the Blair Witch Project wasn't a great movie, but they did that okay because like the whole premise was that they were filming a documentary, and I liked that movie because it made you wonder like what is really going on. Is this woman just being lured out there? Like what's happening? And then Paranormal Activity, even though those like really jumped the shark after the first couple, they also did a good job with the surveillance cameras because everyone had those in their house.
Sure.
You know, I thought
that's
movie was
where
super scary.
Right, where it's reasonable that there would be this footage where it's like, you know, it's not somebody walking around with the camera the whole time. Now, Blair Witch was interesting for me. I'm a little older than you. I saw Blair Witch in the theater on opening night, I think. Opening weekend for sure. Might have been opening night. And was just computer savvy enough at the time that I had seen the online marketing for it, because there was no marketing outside of the internet for that movie. That movie was like marketed. That was like arguably the first viral marketing on the kind of the scale that we think of it to be. And because it was set up as a true story. It was set up like literally these kids went into this woods in Maryland and never came back, and we found the footage, and nobody had ever done that before, and so it was like they built it up online, and that movie creeped me the hell out the first night, like when I first saw it, like go to see it in the theater, and it's like I'd never seen it before, and just, you know, the close with the stuff that we think is tropey and silly now is like the close up where she's like blowing snot bubbles because she's so afraid, but like in the moment when that was brand new, that was terrifying.
Yeah,
that was a person doing a confessional of like maybe minutes before she's gonna die. Like you don't know.
People always like, again, now looking back, because I saw Blair Witch for the first time a couple Christmases ago. My sister and I usually watch one scary movie and one really like stupid Christmas movie on Christmas. So we watched Blair Witch Project, and then we watched the sequel for our stupid movie. And like looking back, like, oh man, this is such a trope. But they kind of invented it. Like everything was based off of what they did. I'm sure that there were other films that had done it before, but you know, that's one of the other, that's the other side, the other edge of the sword when it comes to horror movies rewarding you for your knowledge of tropes, is that you also have people saying like, oh, what a trope, like, oh, that's so overdone, and every horror movie wants to do something new and unique now, which they don't need to do.
I love telling people when somebody says like, I watched Blair Witch Project, you know, somebody let's say that they're younger and weren't old enough or even perhaps alive when Blair Witch came out, and they saw the Blair Witch Project, let's say, oh, I don't know, like 2 Christmases ago, and they say, just as an example, just, you know,
right,
just off the top of my head, like, and they say like, oh, and it, you know, the shaky cam and it's so overdone and everything, it's such a trope that nobody like everybody hates it now. It's like, yeah, it's a trope because that movie did it. Like that's where it started.
Yeah.
Yeah. Arguably, there may have been some other low budget, straight to video things that nobody ever saw that did something like that too. But that was the one that kind of caught the public eye.
Like even with the virtual marketing or the internet marketing for those kinds of found footage movies, because that happens, I feel like, for a lot of the found footage types, because they did it for Paranormal Activity. They had a really big viral marketing campaign. And for Cloverfield, the first Cloverfield movie, they had a whole ARG and everything. what I liked about how Cloverfield did it was that they gave you because they don't give you any real background information in the movie itself. You kind of just start almost in media res, like you start at the party and then monsters. That's what you get.
Yeah.
But if you like follow the viral marketing campaign, you got all the stuff about, the slush show and the oil drilling, the deep sea drilling, and all of that. And I liked that they made the viral marketing part of the movie experience, and they did it so well that there's this huge cult following of the Cloverfield series. Like every time J.J. Abrams is about to do a project, people online are like, oh, is this another Cloverfield movie? And we were only teased about it just a little bit with 10 Cloverfield Lane, which was terrific. I loved it.
Agreed.
And then they had the one that was kind of bad, that was like the Cloverfield Paradox. That's what it was, which I still enjoyed because I really like Cloverfield. But I want more of that, but I want more of that for movies that aren't just found footage stuff too.
And I think, my opinion, like Cloverfield, the original, actually gave, because of the way it was set up, like you said, it was just like they're at the party. There's a guy, T.J. Miller, whose face we don't see till the end, is walking around holding the camera, and he's talking a bunch, so we know this character. And then when things really start to go haywire, he's documenting it as like, this is something weird and unprecedented, and people are going to want to be able to see this. So like he turns himself into like a journalist, a camera journalist, and so that like kind of sells it, like why he keeps the camera. And ultimately, hey everybody, go watch the movie if you haven't already, and then come back and listen to what I'm about to say. Ultimately, he pays for it because it's him having the camera that gives us the great moment of him getting pulled up into the air by the creature. But then he ultimately, if he hadn't been trying to film stuff, he would have maybe run away and survived.
He might not have even been in the city anymore.
he might have gotten underneath that bridge.
Gosh, I saw that movie in the theater with my sister, and I was just like, yes, this is so cool. This is the coolest movie ever. And then I get mad. I get a little defensive when people are like, oh, the shaky cam, it was so hard to watch. I was like, shut up. No, it wasn't. It was a great movie.
Hey, if that's not your thing, that's fine. There's plenty of great Kubrick movies that are still cameras with 1 point perspectives. There's all sorts of there's something for every taste. I remember when Cloverfield came out, because like nobody knew anything about it. It was like suddenly, like a week or two before it hit the theaters, there was suddenly like stuff on the internet about it, and just a little bit of television marketing, because it was done so secretively. And all they showed you was like, oh, the people are at the party, and then there's like sirens and there's loud noises, and then the Statue of Liberty's head comes rolling down the street, and you're like, well, fuck, what is this? I was like, I was on board. I was like, I don't care if this isn't a monster movie. I want to know what just happened, because the marketing was delightful. It was like unlike anything I had seen before.
Yeah, it was like the kind of Godzilla movie that I wanted. I know a lot of people, like, at the beginning, like, I vaguely remember, I think I was in high school when it came out. And I remember people wondering, my dad in particular, like, is this a Godzilla movie? Is this, like, some new Godzilla movie? Because they didn't show the monster in the trailers or anything. And that was part of the reason why I was really excited to watch, because I liked Godzilla. You get a giant monster in a movie, and I'm down for it. It doesn't matter. I like the Godzilla movies. I like Pacific Rim. Give me a big monster and have it destroy a city. I'm in. Let's do it. Especially if the monster comes from the water, which Cloverfield kind of did.
Yeah.
Kind of came from the water.
It absolutely
Space, did. Water.
Well, it came out of the water, supposedly.
Yeah.
And it had like, I don't know, it was one of those movies that had like a handful of really iconic moments, I think, that horror movie fans really get into. There's like when it starts up in the Statue of Liberty's head flies through. There's the bit on the bridge when we first see the monster. We see a part of it. When the whole, like, whatever bridge that is, if that's George Washington or Brooklyn or whatever it was, is rocking, and it's like the span is twisting.
So good.
There's the bit with the belly, the belly buster.
Yeah.
That was like remarkable and completely unexpected because you're like, oh, this is a gigantic monster movie. And then they introduce all the little tick things, and then it's like, and then it takes that weird twist, and we find out that those things can do some terrible, terrible things to human beings.
Yeah.
And particularly to like, a character like again was one of those movies that we actually spent time with the characters because it wasn't we weren't constantly dealing with the monster. The characters were just walking along, talking, trying to get out of town, trying to get out. There was more urgency to it, but it felt it's a lot of the same kind of trope of what It Follows was. It's like the characters are just trying to figure out what's going on and keep on the move in the process. It's just in Cloverfield, it's more urgent because it's like a gigantic monster and mass panic.
Well, he had to go like save his ex or something like that.
Yeah, he had to go to get to the ex. And then eventually ends up in the building where the one building is toppled against the other building, and everything goes to Dutch angles and everything's skewed, and she's impaled on rebar and everything. And then there's of course, there's the whole bit at the end with the cameraman, and when we finally see the monster.
I think I wish more monster movies would do that. That was one of the reasons I was disappointed with War of the Worlds, is because I felt like, was that Tom Cruise?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Tom Cruise, Dakota Fanning.
Yeah, was dealing more with the aliens than the personal stuff. Like, there were times when the personal stuff was like so good. Like when they're all trying to I don't know exactly what's going on, but they're like trying to get in somewhere and there's this huge crowd and he starts getting separated from his family. Like that part, I love. That is the horrifying part of dealing with like these giant catastrophe movies. And that's why, like, Cloverfield, I think, is a horror movie, whereas Independence Day is not. Because Independence Day, the characters have a lot more agency. I mean, it's horrifying that the world is being blown up by aliens, but they are actively fighting against it. Whereas, like, for most people, the horrifying thing would be, you can't do anything about it. How are you going to survive? How are you going to keep your family and your loved ones safe? That's what's terrifying.
Yeah.
And then in 10 Cloverfield Lane, they just kind of took that to a sub level. I loved it.
Can I do my little rant on Independence Day?
Yes.
And the thing that I hate the most about Independence Day?
Yes.
I hate the trailer. And I'll tell you why. The trailer robbed me. It robbed all of us. The trailer robbed every single viewer of that movie. It stole something from us. It stole the moment of the White House being blown up. And it put that in the trailer so that you would want to go see the movie. Imagine what you would have done in the theater with a giant group of people if you didn't see that in the trailer 50 times, and then it happens on the big screen surrounded by 300 people. That would have been a movie moment that people walked out of there talking about and remembering for the rest of their lives. But the trailer stole it from us. I'm very, very angry at that trailer.
That's a really good
Don't get me wrong. It got asses in seats. But once we knew that the White House was going to blow up, it's like, oh, they're going to blow up some other buildings too. Whatever. Like we fully expected. Like, okay, they're going to blow up the, the RCA building. I'm like, and then the Empire State Building. If they hadn't, just imagine what it would have been like to see the White House blow up on the screen if you had not known it was coming.
That would have been so cool. That's one of the things that a lot of horror movies do get wrong too, is that part of the fun is, and I know this kind of contradicts what I said at the beginning, but part of the fun is not knowing like what the monster is or what's really going on, and showing you that in the trailer. I know that makes it hard for some movies, but showing you that in the trailer, you don't want to ruin a jump scare. You don't want to ruin a big surprise. You don't want to do anything like that. You don't want to show the monster's face in the trailer.
Yeah, you don't want to show an actual character getting killed.
Right.
But horror movie trailers imply it pretty strongly a lot. Like you see situations where like, okay, that character's probably not going to make it. Like there's just something is just about to happen. They're probably not going to make it. And most of the time that character does get killed. Like most of the time, they do pay that off. The best horror movies will have that tease in the trailer, and then like that'll happen on the screen and when you're watching the movie, and then suddenly something else will happen and it'll twist it around and it'll really surprise you because you were expecting from the trailer that character is going to bite it.
See, that was why Midsummer really kind of hooked me, and I wanted to see Midsummer ever since I saw the trailer, because it was like, the colors are so pretty and bright, and there is just something super spooky about the way they did it. And they included moments that they gave it to you so out of context that you could never guess what was like, why is this happening? And when I was in the theater, or when I was in, not the theater, when I was watching the movie, I wanted to know, well, hey, that scene in the trailer, where does that fit in? Like, I wanted to know more about that. I think Ari Aster, I'm really excited to see what else he ends up doing.
I haven't seen Midsummer yet. I
You
know
should.
I have to.
Good.
I know I have to. I will someday, I'm sure.
I didn't find that movie as scary for a couple different reasons, but I don't want to spoil it for you. So have you seen Hereditary, though?
I love Hereditary. Hereditary messed me up.
It was so good. When I was watching it, I started watching it in my living room, and I was like, oh, I'm going to turn off all the lights. I'm going to watch this scary movie. And that first moment where
what a mistake.
She turns off the light and you see the grandma. I was like, oh, Alex, do you want to watch a movie with me?
I don't need to watch this by myself anymore. I'm okay with not being by myself now. Yeah.
I'm glad I kept watching it with someone else.
Yeah.
Even though I think that was the most, like, it was definitely the most jump scary part of the movie for me, and the most, like, visually terrifying part for me, actually, despite all the rest of the horrifying stuff that happens in it. That was the part I was like, this is gonna mess me up if I don't have someone to sit and watch it with me. Or a blanket. Something.
Well, that movie has a few different spots in it where like something happens, and like there's a moment halfway-ish through the movie, and if you've seen the movie, you know what I'm talking about. Halfway or not quite halfway through the movie, where a thing happens, and you might like I was watching it by myself in the dark again too, because I'm a sucker, and I like my whole body tensed up. I gasped, my jaw dropped open, and I didn't change that position for like 10 minutes.
I know.
Like the whole sequence, waiting. And then the drive, and then he slowly goes inside, and then there's the long wait before she goes outside, and I'm just like, like, there is something to be said for the pause and for letting the camera linger and for letting the moment land. And that movie, like, if it had gone much longer, I might have had to turn the movie off. Like, and taken a breather if that sequence had been more stretched out, because I was just like, I don't know what's going to happen next. I don't know how this, like, how are people going to react to this? What's going to happen? Where's it going to go? Like, is he going to say something? He's just going to walk inside and not do anything. He's just going to go to bed. And I'm like,
Gosh, yeah, that was effective. Still, like, thinking about it, that scene was brutal. And Aster he wasn't afraid to let the camera linger on those horrifying scenes, because there's also the part at the very end where like it just lingers. Several times the camera just lingers on terrible things and on like dead people and stuff like that. But at the same time will pan across things that you want to look more into, like it makes you want to look, and then stays on the things that you don't want to look at. And that, I thought that was just really effective directing. And Midsommar does a lot of the same thing. Like, obviously, that's a purposeful directorial thing. Midsommar also has a couple of moments that are like that I'm excited for you to watch.
Well, and that sequence in Hereditary, too, where it takes all that time to do it. And then you're kind of like, okay, and then she screams. And you're like, okay.
Yeah,
so
finally.
that's how this ends. And then they show you.
Mm-hmm. And then they show you.
And then you're like, well, son of a, really?
Yep.
Like,
yep.
They tack two moments at the end where like you finally get the release of like, okay, she screams, she knows, and then they do show you too. And because because time has passed that she's been out there, it's even worse.
Yeah.
Because she's been there all night.
Yeah. Oh. Such a good movie. I'm so excited for his next stuff.
Now the actress who played the daughter, I wonder how old she was. I'm sure I could look it up, but I find myself wondering if she was not yet 18. I have a feeling she probably was 18, 19, 20. But if she's not, like, I find myself wondering this all the time in horror movies. Here's a trope to look at: is like the kid in the horror movie, like.
Mm-hmm. Did they watch it?
Well, does the kid watch it? How much do they know about what's being filmed? The producers and the director have to talk to the parents, get permission from the parents. Like, how does that casting meeting go? If that kid is going, if a child character in a story is going to get brutally killed, and it's going to really be played up and be a big ugly moment. How do you have that discussion with, like, as the casting director or the director or a producer talking to the parent of the kid? Like, you know, I don't know. There's a part of me that wants to, like, I have this weird fascination with it. I would love to be in that meeting or to hear how that meeting went. But I also just don't. I really don't want to know what they talk to the parents about and how they describe what's going to happen. Because with kids in movies, when there's swearing and there's sex and blood and guts and whatnot, they can, a lot of times, the way they shoot it, they can do it in such a way that the kid never sees anything, right? The kid never sees the really gory, icky stuff. The kid doesn't hear the other characters swear. They film the kid separately, and tell them you're reacting to the person saying this, and it doesn't have a swear in it, and that's how you react to that. So they can kind of keep that all out of there. But there has to be a discussion sometimes with the parents. Whew.
I looked it up. She was born in 2002, which would have made her 16 when Hereditary came out.
Right, so her parents had to have a talk.
Yeah.
Like, wow.
Gosh.
Now, given how good she was in the role, and I feel like she's, you know, that actress is, like, she's remarkable in the role, and she's more than likely kind of got her head screwed on pretty straight and really knows what she's doing, and she's a professional. She's a professional. You know, she's a professional, and she's probably had jobs before, and so, like, it might be an easier conversation to have than if your child isn't necessarily prepared for something quite that heavy.
Yeah, that is a really good point. And the use of children in horror movies, I understand why, because kids can be very creepy, and they represent all sorts of things, like symbolic of innocence, and very clearly that's what they were going for in Hereditary. But, like, you put a kid in a movie and it automatically makes it, like, 10 times scarier. Like that's why the Poltergeist I don't like the Poltergeist that much, but, you know, at the same time, it was automatically extra scary because of the little kid.
Yeah. I'm trying to think.
Yeah, I want to go watch Hereditary again.
What are my favorite kids in horror movies? Probably the best kid in a horror movie, and it's because she's the monster. I think she's really effective as that, is Samara in the Ring.
Yeah.
Because she's used sparingly, and when she is on screen, she's really weird and terrifying.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the Stephen King novels and movies do interesting jobs with children.
Stephen King doesn't mind killing kids.
No,
he doesn't have a big problem with it.
There were several movies where a lot of kids died. Several books, and I read Nosferatu, which is by his son, and that also, like, it feels so much like a Stephen King novel. It was really good. I would recommend it. But that also makes use of children in a terrifying way. That's a good one to read around Christmas time. And
for your Christmas scares next year.
Yeah. What is it called? Oh, Pet Sematary is the one I was thinking of in particular. So I think that one made pretty good use of the kids.
That book is a rough read. I imagine even more so for a parent.
I'm sure.
Because have you read the book?
I haven't.
It's Stephen King has said this too, because he knew it's happening, you know what's coming. Okay, we got family moves into house right next to road, lots of cars going along, little kid. What's going to happen? We know what's going to happen. Yep. And then you spend the next 80 pages with it not happening and just waiting for it to happen. So it's a book that builds the dread very nicely. The movie's okay. The original version of the movie is okay with it. It builds it pretty well, because I think the characterization of the parents and Judd next door and the daughter and everything are pretty solid. I watched the remake recently where they made some changes. It just didn't fire on all cylinders for me. But it is one of those, I wonder what's going to happen. They just told you. They introduced a little kid. It's Chekhov's road. They just put on Chekhov's semi truck has been introduced on this road, and someone or something is going to get hit by it, and probably more than one. So yeah, it's just dread. Like when you're reading the book, it's just like it's coming. It's just like you're just waiting. Okay, when's it going to happen?
Yeah, Pet Sematary was one of the first horror movies I ever watched. My dad loves horror, I should say. he still loves horror.
It's like, I'm done with it.
And we would watch The Crypt Keeper and The Twilight Zone. The first movie I have a memory of watching is the old 1960s The Blob.
Oh yeah.
And that I remember that terrifying me and not being able to watch it. And Pet Sematary was like one of the first ones he made us watch, and I was like, wow, Dad, okay. But I'm glad that he did, because I mean he was the one who introduced me to both horror movies and also Star Wars, and that led me down a dark path. So thanks, Dad, for My sister reads Stephen King novels a lot too. Like she's a big fan of him, whereas I've only read a couple. So we had a bunch of Stephen King novels in our house too, because my dad loved them. So every once in a while, I'd grab a book and I'd open up a page and read a little bit, and I'd be like, okay, nope, all right, that's enough for me. Let's not keep going. I don't know why I always wanted to read the middle of a Stephen King novel, but I've read a lot of middle pages.
Oh boy! I mean, I've read quite a bit of Stephen King. I devoured it. I discovered it when I was in junior high. Discovered King, and I read pretty much everything that he ever did up until about midway through college, and then I kind of tailed off, and I got more into movies, because I finally had money to be able to go to movies, and I got to the point where it was easier for you to own. Like I was a grown up, so I had my own VCR, and I could get rent tapes myself, and wasn't dependent upon what the family wanted, that sort of thing. So I got more into movies, but yeah, there's even a few of those early Stephen King novels that they're rougher than things are. There's some rough stuff that happens in there that they didn't do quite the same way for the movie. Like they niced it up for the movie. Mm-hmm. Because the movie viewing audience would be like, nope, not going to accept that. But the book, he doesn't pull a punch. There's a few different spots.
Something different too, just a little bit more intimate about reading a horror story, I think, compared to watching the movie, because it forces you to picture everything. Whereas in a horror movie, you can always do this, but you can't do that when you're reading a book. And I've read some pretty good horror novels. Like House of Leaves was one that messed me up for a second. I liked that one a lot. But yeah, there's some really good ones out there. I've only read a couple Stephen King novels though.
Have you read Cujo?
I haven't read Cujo. I've seen the movie.
Okay, I won't say anything.
Yeah, I know. It's the dogs, man. And I know the difference between the novel and the book, because he talks about some of the differences in his novels in his book on writing.
Oh, sure.
So I've read some of that. I had to read that for creative writing in high school. On writing, not Cujo. And then I teach a Stephen King essay sometimes when I do writing to show argument structure. He has an essay called why we crave horror movies. And I think it's a really interesting explanation. I don't think it's the only explanation, but it's interesting to hear from like the horror guy's point of view.
Sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm in the midst of watching The Stand now, so like I'm all over Stephen King, and I'm designing a game that is Stephen King horror style, Stephen King style horror. The Stand. It's different. Did you watch the original, the miniseries that they did in the 90s? The miniseries in the 90s is very linear. It tells the story from beginning to end, just like in the book. The book starts with Campion running and getting out before the base locks down, and he gets everybody else sick and blah blah, and it takes off the story. The miniseries that they're doing now, it jumps around in time. So there's some people that have been a little bit bothered by like it's not telling the story linearly. We're only 3 episodes of 8 into it right now, so there's still a lot to go. I feel like they've touched on some things that the original miniseries didn't do, which I like that they're getting some of that stuff in there. There's some things that I feel I have to wait to see if they're going to pay it off, because it's going to be a few more episodes before. Like right now, I feel like Nick is underserved, but we only really started to get much about Nick in the 3rd episode, and Nick is an important character, and so. They just, have you been watching it at all?
No, I haven't seen any of it. I'm probably going to wait until like everything's out.
Sure. And then binge through the whole thing.
Binge.
They've made some choices, of spending some time with some characters that you wouldn't necessarily expect that they're going to spend a lot of time on early. I was surprised. They've spent a fair amount of time with Nadine early on, setting her up. And they hit Rita. They I don't know if you know the book.
I'm thinking of a different Rita from a different book.
in the book, Larry Underwood, the singer, leaves New York with Rita Blakemore. Hey there, sirens. And she's this like socialite type who's totally unprepared to live in the world after. She's immune. Okay. She's going to survive the flu, but she's not prepared to deal with the world after. And so, she's not in the original miniseries. They basically,
okay.
They had Larry escape the city with Nadine. They just rolled Nadine into kind of be the stand-in for Rita, as well as becoming like what Nadine becomes later. So they dove into that, so you get to see these other characters that haven't come into play. I'm a little, there's stuff I wish that they would do, but I know they probably won't, because it just doesn't pay for they've only got the 8 episodes. It's a big book. I'd love it if they had the kid in the story. I know everybody who reads the book is like, why isn't the kid in the story? And this is not a kid. This is a guy that calls himself the Kid, capital K. And he is a terrible human being. But he, they're not probably going to do anything with him. And there's one, like my favorite part of the book actually, and it will never make its way into film. Never, ever, ever. There's a segment. It's maybe a third of the way into the book. It's a whole chapter broken down into subsections that talks about, and King refers to it in the narration of the sequence of like it was the final cut. Some would say the unkindest cut of all, which is all these people who survive the superflu, but then who don't survive what comes after. There's the person that breaks their leg and and can't get to help, and there's no one around them, and they die from infection. Oof. There's the kid that falls down the well. There's somebody who gets into a car accident and manages to kill themselves. There's somebody who gets themselves trapped somewhere and dies of thirst. Just all these things that, like, because these people are all like in like little towns or little out of the way pockets, and they're alone and they're not prepared. They're not taking the situation seriously enough, and people die from just like there's no doctors, there's no first responders, there's no 911, there's like bad stuff happens and these characters don't make it, and it's so like. It's one of my favorite parts of the book because it's so true to life. Like the fact that Stephen King takes a whole chapter and just says, okay, now we're going to watch all these people die, and we're going to remind you how serious this world is. Which will never see film. They won't spend time doing that. The most they'll maybe do is they'll maybe have the guy who gets appendicitis and then they can't get the appendix out in time and he dies. When the veterinarian tries to take his appendix out.
I feel like this is actually one of those chapters that I read from the middle of a book because it sounds so familiar to me, but I probably read it when I was like 10 or something. Oh man, how scary to, what a great time to have a new miniseries about The Stand.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah, but they were on their way into production when all of this happened. It's like, what are you going to do?
Know.
Yeah.
Oh, it's great ARG. This is all.
Oh, yeah.
It's all. Oof.
Well, the pandemic sucks and everything, but at least it's not 99.6% or 99.6% deadly or whatever it is in the book. It's like 99.6, 99.4 or something like that.
Yeah. Oh man. Anyway,
so on the whole, I'm enjoying it, but I'm looking forward to like seeing where they go. There's some characters that are just underserved at this point because of how they're jumping around. So I'm waiting to see how they're going to play that all out.
Yeah, it's interesting that they are doing that. I'm assuming so they can make connections or have some kind of.
Well, they frame it. The thing that The Stand suffers from, as far as visual storytelling goes, and I think it suffers for it in the original miniseries. If you like Stephen King's writing, you'll read a 1,200 page book and be fine that like nothing major is going to happen for 700 pages. It's just going to be slowly all these characters dying, and we're just going to meet all these people, and we're going to get to know them, and they're going to meet each other, and you'll read all those hundreds of pages. But the TV audience is like, let's go. Yeah. What's going on here? And so the way they do it is they start with some of the stuff, like they start in Boulder, Colorado, where the characters have gathered 5 months after the flu started, and we learn some things there, and then they jump back in time to what those characters were like beforehand, and we see kind of where they're going to end up. So they're able to kind of, they use it to frame, so we get to see where characters are going to end up, at least to some extent. We get some kind of cliffhangers of like setups for things, rather than having to wait. Like, okay, let's spend 4 episodes of everybody just slowly walking westward, which is what it would be if they just went it in the order of the book.
That makes sense, yeah.
And in the 90s, yeah, maybe that flew okay on network television. But in the era of heavily serialized television and the expectation that the story is going to move forward and there's going to be something big that happens at the end of every episode, audiences expect there's got to be something going on. We can't watch for an hour and have like, oh, and now these characters leave a gun quit.
That's like the prestige television problem.
Oh, these characters, if they had gone to all the characters all at the same time, like they did in the first one, where they just jumped from character to character, the first hour would end and nobody would be dead yet. Like they're like literally, like these characters would have sick family members. Nobody will be leaving town yet. Like the crisis doesn't really get rocking and rolling until it takes a month or two of the flu happening before everybody really gets killed and everything becomes really, really dire for the characters. They like, you really just want to watch like an hour of conversations between characters talking about their pasts.
Maybe.
Yeah, and maybe some people dig on that, but that's not going to fly too well
for a TV audience. Yeah,
for a TV audience in 2020, 2021.
The people who want that will read the book.
Yeah, absolutely. And somebody out there is going to cut the whole thing together in order when it's done. and you'll be able to find it on YouTube or something, or download it somewhere where somebody will say, well, we took the 2020 miniseries of The Stand and we cut it all up and we put it all in order. So for the people who want to just spend 2 hours of just people talking about like what's been going on in their lives as the flu rages around them, you can watch that. Somebody will do that version. People have put, people have given. I just saw a list the other day of like, you want to watch the entire Star Trek universe in order? Here's what you watch. Here's the order. Here's how you watch everything.
I need that.
So you can sit down and watch the whole thing in order.
Yep. Actually, yes, that is something that would be up my alley.
You want to watch Memento in order? Here's how you do it. Here's what you cut up and watch it. Here's how to ruin the movie. Because watching Memento in order would ruin the movie.
It's true, but
but anyway, that's another one of my rants. People want to watch Memento in order. Well, it's confusing. Oh.
Well, yeah.
Here's how to watch Pulp Fiction in order.
I can't get on my rant about Memento and Christopher Nolan right now, so
okay.
I am not going to get into that. But yeah, this was a lot of fun though. I have enjoyed talking about horror. We just like went on tangent. Gosh, now I really want to watch Hereditary again, and
well, you got a couple hours tonight yet, right?
Yeah,
you can watch it right now. I'll
Probably
text.
Not.
We'll text. We'll start watching and we'll text.
It's too dark. I need to watch it in the bright of day.
Well, then you're not gonna be able to see anything. There's a lot of dark scenes in the movie.
I'll turn my brightness up. Oh man. Yeah, this was a lot of fun. We got to do this again and talk more. Maybe I'll read The Stand before we talk again.
Okay, how fast can you plow through like 1,150 pages?
Not that fast. I'm a pretty slow reader.
I've been listening to the audiobook. It's like 50 something hours.
See, I can do audiobooks. Yeah, I can do long audiobooks because I will like sit and crochet and just listen to stuff. But reading, I tend to like I'll read a little bit and then I'll get distracted by something and I gotta do it in little chunks. So unless it really enwraps me, it's hard.
And you know what, we can talk about The Stand way down the road sometime after it, because it's going to be like over a month before the series is done.
I'll definitely binge the series after.
You'll find time to read it at some point if you want to. We can always come back to it.
Yeah, awesome.
I kind of want to watch the old series after I watch this one again.
Compare them.
Yeah, I mean, I remember the original series pretty well, but I like the actors. You know, there's a bunch of actors in the original one that I really like quite a lot. So.
Yeah. Well, thank you for all watching. I could talk about this all night, but I don't think we should. If we get on another tangent, we're going to be going for another whole hour.
Oh, come on, why not?
I have grades I have to do.
Okay.
I'm so sad that the winter break gets over. Oh man. Well, thanks for talking with me, Craig.
Thank you for talking with me. Thank you for agreeing to do more than what we had originally planned to do and to do these little horror talks.
I want to do it again.
We'll do some more of these. It'll be fun.
I want to do it again. So. And we'll be meeting again next Friday to talk more RPG R&D.
Yes. Okay. We got guests lined up and everything, so we're going to be ready to rock and roll. All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye.